You all know this, and when 80 years, that's 3 or 4 generations probably, of Arab children, when they go to kindergarten, go to school, those lucky enough to go to kindergarten or school, and there the teachers tell them about the history of this country, the history of Palestine, and of course they explain how it all happened. They probably don't mention that it was a mistake for the Palestinians to give up their state in '48, but about how things are over the past 20 years, for example, and how the rights of the Palestinian people are ignored, despite all the resolutions. Of course, the children absorb this. When I tell the Israelis this, the response was very strange, like, no, that doesn't justify extremism. Well, it probably doesn't justify it. Extremism can't be justified.
Regarding relations with Israel, how do you assess the agreement in which Moscow is present? In your opinion, what will happen next? What about the Peace Council? Has Moscow received a specific answer yet regarding the billion-dollar aid?
We have long-standing relations with Israel. There is a huge Soviet and Russian diaspora there. The Russian language in Israel, well, can be used practically anywhere of the country. And since Soviet times, well, the Soviet Union was the first to recognize Israel, if we talk about how this state was created. And we have always, and President Putin repeatedly emphasized this when he came to the Kremlin, that when we talk about a Middle East settlement, we always meaning not only satisfying the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinians, but also satisfying Israel's interest in ensuring its security, because the environment. But in this regard, I also recall my conversations with many Israeli colleagues when we tried to promote the approaches enshrined in the Security Council, the UN, and the quartet of mediators that existed Russia, and before that the Soviet Union, the US, Europe, and the UN, and persuaded the Israelis to take a constructive approach to the creation of a Palestinian state, which, by the way, in 1948, when the General Assembly decided to partition Palestine and create the State of Israel, the decision was to create 2 states, Palestine and Israel, and the implication was that both should be created. That is, there was such a mutual dependence. Yes, the Arabs and Palestinians didn't understand at the time that it was in their interests, and as you know, they didn't implement that resolution. There was fighting. Then it resumed several times, the Yom Kippur War, the Six-Day War, and much more. Now, when Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has openly said that there will be no Palestinian state, I don't think that this is in Israel's security interests, which Israel legitimately wants to ensure for itself, and which we would like to see for Israel and for the region as a whole. If there is no Palestinian state, I also discussed this with my Israeli partners, if there is no Palestinian state, extremism in the region will feed. When there was a terrorist attack that we condemned in October 2023, Israel responded with large-scale military action and in response to calls from members of the international community to nevertheless respect the international humanitarian law not to use force against civilians, Israeli officials and IDF leaders openly stated, "There are no civilians there. There are all terrorists from the age of 3. This, of course, is a completely incorrect, unacceptable statement, but how am I trying to draw attention to this? 80 years of occupation, 80 years of settlement construction, withdrawal from Gaza under Ariel Sharon, then Gaza was blockaded. You know all this. And when 80 years, that's 3 or 4 generations probably of Arab children, when they go to kindergarten, go to school, those lucky enough to go to kindergarten or school, and there the teachers tell them about the history of this country, the history of Palestine, and of course they explain how everything happened. They probably don't mention that it was a mistake for the Palestinians to give up their state in 1948, but about how things are over the past 20 years, for example, and how the rights of the Palestinian people are ignored despite all the resolutions. Of course, the children absorb this. When I tell the Israelis this, the response was very strange, like, no, 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 that doesn't justify extremism. Well, it probably doesn't justify it. Extremism can't be justified, but the root causes must be addressed, just like in any other crisis, including the Ukrainian one. Okay, we've talked about this more than once, and without the creation of a Palestinian state, we are convinced there will be no peace and stability there. The question arises how to create it and what's left there. Gas. You know, the Peace Council was announced in the fall of 25. The Americans submitted a corresponding draft to the UN Security Council. We and our Chinese colleagues introduced amendments, first of all so that the activities of this Peace Council, its goals and its work programs would be based on existing consensus decisions of the United Nations. The co-sponsors said they did not want to do this, that more decisive action was needed. Both the Palestinians themselves and all Arab countries asked us and the Chinese not to block the adoption of this resolution. Therefore, both Moscow and Beijing abstained. We welcomed the fact that the first stage of this Trump plan included a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and the exchange of bodies. And this happened, of course, overall, and military activity has sharply decreased. But ceasefire violations remain. There is statistics on this matter, and there is statistics that UN representatives are disseminating, and there is ample evidence that violence continues, in isolated cases, but nevertheless, they have now announced a second stage. And here, it's important to understand how this Peace Council, formed under the chairmanship of President Trump, will manage the executive structures created under this council. These structures are composed of foreigners. Many of them are known for their past actions, but these are subjective judgments. The main thing is that we will judge by specific actions. And of course, the representation of Palestinians in this work is crucial, especially the Palestinian National Authority, which is not yet participating in this process as an administration. A committee has been created, an executive committee of technocrats. How will roles be distributed? How will Hamas disarmament be carried out specifically? Who is discussing this with Hamas, and how will it be monitored later? I heard that the Israelis want to destroy all tunnels. This will be a huge undertaking. Hamas members, by some indications, are ready to seek some kind of compromise. Israel, as I understand it, believes that Hamas should not exist at all, either as a military or a political entity. Well, I don't know. Hamas, the way they spoiled them in Lebanon, is part of political life. In any case, one cannot share their views. There are many countries where the leadership is dominated by radical views. And of course, how will gas supplies be restored? Remember the ideas that were expressed, almost creating a Middle Eastern Riviera there? A casino town, a resort town, plans to resettle Palestinians in Somalia, Indonesia, Iraq, Egypt, Jordan have been openly discussed. This requires a very careful approach because our information is that the overwhelming majority Palestinians would like to live where they were born, where their ancestors lived, where their graves are. But for this, we need to restore the Gaza Strip, which has been completely destroyed. And if we have to resettle the Palestinians, probably somewhere because it's impossible to live there now, there must be guarantees that they will return, that there will be gas, housing, and infrastructure. Life support will be restored quickly, and we are ready to do our part. As you know, President Putin publicly announced, in conjunction with Mahmoud Abbas's visit, which we had in January, that we are ready to allocate $1 billion for the restoration of Palestine, primarily the Gaza Strip, from the funds currently frozen by the United States under the Biden administration. I heard that President Trump, when he learned about this, reacted positively, saying it's a good idea. But since then, the Americans have no way confirmed their president's assessment. We officially sent them a note in which we said that we ask that this note be considered our consent and our order to direct even $1 billion of our money to projects to be implemented in the gas sector. And of course, we asked that we be notified about any specific projects. Clearly, we don't want that. Our money goes to something other than providing the basic needs of the civilian population: housing, clinics, schools, and so on. And I really hope that it was just announced in Washington that they are holding a meeting of this Peace Council on February 19th, and that already countries have pledged to give $5 billion. I hope that one of these billions, meaning Russian. And finally, on the topic of Palestine, let's not forget that the situation on the West Bank is becoming increasingly tense and explosive. The actions of the Israelis, including the recent issuance of a decree regarding the procedure for land acquisition, the procedure for urban development work, until recently, all of this was coordinated with the Palestinian National Authority. But now, unilateral decisions and analysis of the consequences these decisions will have shows that little will be left of the lands controlled by the Palestinian National Authority. And there have already been rumors in the media about plans to leave 2 municipalities for Palestinians on the West Bank, with everything else occupied by settlements, including the recent decisions on settlements that will cut off the West Bank from East Jerusalem. We are talking with our Israeli colleagues, communicating, and having personal meetings, and we are laying all this out. We're trying to explain that this won't guarantee Israel's long-term security, that negotiations are needed. But for now, the prevailing line there reflects a focus on a forced solution to all problems. Yes, with the support of the United States, but I think the United States also understand the need for compromise agreements, and we will support this. We acted as mediators, and when promoted Palestinian reunification, all Palestinian factions, twice and even 3 times, all factions met in Moscow, even adopted a unanimous statement in favor of ensuring Palestinian unity on the platform of the Palestine Liberation Organization. The People's Republic of China invited them for the same purpose, but so far it hasn't been possible to ensure this. And now, generally speaking, there's no such unity in Palestinian ranks. And it's more necessary than ever for Palestinians to speak with one voice, with the support, of course, of their Arab brothers. But if our services are needed to build bridges between Palestinians, Arabs, and Israel, I know that the United States is actively involved in this, as are the Gulf countries. But if we are needed, of course, we will not stand aside. Moscow is ready.